Well, it's pretty sad that it's the last time we're going to be doing a comparison like this, Australia versus Germany. Now, of course, this car probably needs no introduction. It's the ultimate HSV, the GTSR W1. We're going to put it up against Germany's finest here, the M6 Grand Coupe, and see how it goes on some of Australia's most interesting back roads. First, a quick look at how this pair stacks up. Their V8 engines take a different tack but deliver similarly devastating results. BMW claims a 3.9 second sprint to 100 km an hour, HSV 4.2 seconds. But on this test, it's how they feel on the road that's of most interest. Both are big four-door sedans with rear-wheel drive and both boast a six-figure price tag. In spite of the figures, however, they each offer blisteringly quick acceleration, though it's the HSV that's appreciably more audacious, barking and snarling as it spins to redline. Well, I tell you what, there is a definite difference in the way that these two things deliver their power. The BMW, like, for all its power, it's really quite subtle. It sneaks up on you. It's one of those cars that before you know it, you're going a hell of a lot faster than you think you are. Whereas in this, there's just absolutely no mistake about it. I think you'd call the BMW a bit of an assassin, whereas this is that hitman that just comes up and shoots you in the face. As well as the acceleration on offer, it's the conviction with which these two attack corners that's most impressive. The cohesion and communication on offer is simply outstanding. The pair differentiated only by a sense that one is built to tackle lumpy, unkept back roads where the other prefers autobahns and racetracks. Really though, it's a closer comparison than it may sound. Well, if there is one criticism of the M6's suspension, that it's not quite as good at coping with multiple loads. So if you're coming into a corner, you've got one side of the car loaded up and there's a few sort of mid-corner lumps and bumps, the car will tend to skip and jump around before getting those wheels pushed back down to the ground. And that's something we genuinely haven't noticed in the W1. Not that the W1's ride is perfect. It's a tad brittle at low speeds, perhaps owing to the single setting of the Super Shock dampers fitted in place of HSV's magnetic ride control found on the regular GTS. It still manages to handle itself well in spite of its weight and brakes with confidence again and again without fade, something we couldn't say of the M6. Well, yesterday when our V8 supercar driver Luke Yilden run both these cars on the track, we did notice that the Grand Coupe tended to get a little bit of brake fade after a few hard laps, and I myself actually noticed the front right hand wheel lock up at one point, which is a little bit strange given the car runs ABS. But I tell you what, here on the road you don't really notice any difference in braking performance. The car still pulls up really well and turns in nice and sharply to those really tight corners you get down here in South Gippsland. Running an automatic transmission against a manual may seem odd, but with HSV offering only a 6-speed Tremec gearbox, our hands were tied. Pedal count notwithstanding, the transmission choice found here further stretched the divide between our pair, something that, all other things being equal, would see the BMW and HSV appeal to a very different audience. Well, as good as that 6-speed manual transmission is in the W1, there's just something about this automatic in the BMW when it comes to touring. It just makes things effortless and easy, and you can just sort of cruise along and enjoy the luxury of the vehicle without having to think about it or work too much. Now, I know that's probably something that takes a little bit away from what these cars are all about. They are sports cars after all, but if you're plugging away on that long highway trip, this auto does make light work of the situation. As well as being a great car for touring in long distances, and that automatic being, just so sharp and so smooth as it is, we do find that when you come into corners and you want to gear down, especially at higher RPM, the gearbox can be a little bit slow to react. Now, arguably on the road, that's not such a big deal, but when you're on the racetrack, as we were yesterday, you do find that you want to get into gear a little bit sooner than you can when you're under brakes and just help those brakes all that you can. And in the Beamer, that just falls a little bit short of the W1. Threading up and down our test roads, hammering into closing radius turns and booming out of exits, the GTSR W1 and M6 Grand Coupe prove connected and confident, though it's the HSV that's a little more honest. It's less digital than its German rival, which stands out as a positive on country roads. Around town, however, we think it's the M6 that's an easier car to live with. Well, for all their similarities, these two are, of course, vastly different cars, and they're really going to speak to a very different audience. Now, the W1, of course, it is that pure Aussie muscle car with a bit of an American heart under the bonnet. And look, that's something we've grown up with. It's something that we've come to love, and of course, it's something we're really going to miss. Now, look, it's really hard to talk about the W1 without descending into platitudes. I mean, this really is the best example of a muscle car I've ever driven, locally developed or otherwise. It's just a fantastically complete car. There's not one part of this that doesn't fit the bill of what a muscle car is supposed to deliver, and yet on top of that, it's just so refined and so easy to drive. You normally jump into things like this and they're trying to kill you with oversteer, or they're snappy and a little bit rude, hard to drive in the wet. You can't drive them around town. Nothing could be further from the truth with the W1. It's as easy to live with in day-to-day scenarios as it is at full tilt, and what better way to drive this thing than at full tilt? Away from driving, it's the M6 that shows its price tag. Its merino leather-trimmed cockpit, fancy electronic equipment and upmarket buttons and dials are appreciably finer than those of the HSVs, which shares its cabin with a 60 grand Commodore. Like we said, different cars, different audiences, and each exceptionally fast. So which then takes the win? Well, personality differences aside, these are both phenomenally capable cars. Whether you go for Aussie brawn or German stealth, they're really quick, they handle really well, and they do stop on a dime, especially on the road. But me, choosing from the heart, I'm going with the W1. It just speaks to what we are as a muscle car nation. It's quick, it's loud, it's aggro, and look, as far as HSVs go, there's no doubt that this is the best thing that they have built in 30 years, and really, I just want one.